other journalists. A colleague of us has been killed yesterday. That brings the number of journalists being killed in Gaza to 196. How many times we can ask the same questions that journalists in Gaza needed to be protected, and how many incidents we're still waiting for the Israelis to be investigated and for you to come back to us and said, this person's held accountable for the killing of Muhammad Baluch.
So journalists in Gaza absolutely need to be protected. When it comes to Israeli government investigations, you should ask the government of Israel that question. We obviously engaged with them about that and pressed for answers, but you are certainly welcome to do so as well. Those are Israeli government investigations, but we have made clear that when it comes to journalists, they need to be protected. I will tell you, ultimately, the answer to this is to get a ceasefire.
The truth is that the U.S. has blocked the ceasefire motions many times at the UN Security Council. So why is he always coming out here confusing himself? Let's watch.
Which is why we continue to push for a ceasefire. The journalists that are operating in Gaza are doing so with incredible heroism. All of us in this room, including in many cases the United States government, know what we know about actions on the ground because there are journalists there that are reporting on it. The U.S. doesn't have any personnel on the ground to verify reports, so we rely on journalists to bring that information forward, and we rely on the work that they do. But as long as it is an active conflict zone, journalists are going to be at risk the same way other civilians are going to be at risk, which is why we believe the ultimate answer to this question is to reach a ceasefire, and why we continue to use all of the diplomatic muscle that we can bring to bear to try to get one over the line.
Sure. I mean, the reason I ask you is because the United States value press freedom and the work of the journalists on the ground, but you don't hear you condemning the killing of Palestinian journalists like you condemn the killing of other journalists in conflict zones.
We absolutely condemn the death of any journalist. We don't want to see any journalist hurt anywhere. Now, when it comes to the specifics of how any one journalist dies, while we object to the killing of any journalist, oftentimes we don't know the circumstance under which they were killed, whether it is an accidental strike, whether they were somewhere where they were covering an incident and there was a militant nearby. It's difficult to speak to the motives behind a strike when we don't know them, but absolutely we condemn the death of any journalist anywhere in the world.
Okay, and the killing of civilians, there was a grandfather of a girl that was killed a year ago called Dream, 2-year-old. The grandfather was killed yesterday. His name is Khalid Nabhan. And he became an icon because he was very close to his granddaughter, and he was killed as well in Nusayrat camp yesterday. Do you still think that this is also random killing? It was an incident that needed to be investigated? How these civilians are dying every single day, whether it's 50 or 60, it's a number that we keep repeating all the time in every briefing.
I think that there continue to be unspeakable tragedies happening in Gaza every day. Not just the death of civilians, the maiming of civilians, the people who find it difficult to get enough to eat, the people that find it difficult to get access to medical care. It is an ongoing tragedy, and the answer to stopping that tragedy is to reach a ceasefire, which doesn't just require acquiescence by Israel, it requires acquiescence by Hamas. And that is what has been so difficult to get over the past 7 months, well, more than that, 7 months since the president outlined the ceasefire proposal that we put on the table, but we've been pushing to get a ceasefire since long before that. There are two parties that have to agree to a ceasefire, and I know everyone always asks me questions in this briefing room about actions by the government of Israel, but there are two parties to this conflict, and they both have to agree to this ceasefire, and we will continue to push both parties to come to an agreement precisely because the tragic deaths that you laid out, quite rightfully, continue to happen and need to stop.
Thank you.
I'll come
just to follow up on the journalists. 190 journalists. That's all by accidental, you think?
I can't speak to any of those incidents without having full information. But ultimately, Saeed, every one of those deaths is a tragedy, which is why we need to stop more deaths from happening, which is why we need to get a ceasefire.
No, I understand. I just want, you don't think that all of them are accidents.
I don't offer, so Saeed, I don't offer opinions based on speculation from this podium.
Right.
I offer them based on conclusions that we're able to reach after looking at a full assessment of incidents.
Okay. Following up on the talks that you explained just a little while ago, the Israeli Ma'arif newspaper just came out with a report that basically Egypt has reached an agreement with Hamas on some sort of a transitional committee that is not Hamas, that could run Gaza and look after things and so on. Would that be acceptable to you?
I'm not going to speak to that report. I'm not aware of it, but I can tell you we have been having conversations with a number of parties in the region for some time, which you know because I've spoken to them from this podium before, about what the post-conflict period ought to look like in Gaza, including what governance ought to look like. We have made clear that the status quo as it existed before October 7th cannot continue. Gaza cannot continue to be governed by Hamas. But as to what the governance looks like, not something I can speak to today.
Okay, because Netanyahu said today, told the court that he will not be able to attend tomorrow, and normally there's something, maybe big. Do you expect there may be an announcement tomorrow on a ceasefire?
I have no idea why he's not able to attend the court hearing tomorrow.
Couple questions on the Palestinian issue. Israel is deploying dozens of autonomous weapons all throughout the West Bank that basically will not be able to discriminate between a perpetrator or a civilian and so on. Doesn't that make every Palestinian in the West Bank potentially a target
I can't
for Israel?
I can't speak to that particular deployment, but I would say when it comes to the use of any weapons, that our expectations are the same, that Israel must fully comply with international humanitarian law and protect civilian life.
All right. On the aid, the Financial Times, I guess, reported that aid is at its lowest point, despite what you're saying that they a lot. Can you explain to us the aid situation now?
It continues to be extremely challenging. We have seen some improvements. There were a number of days last week when we saw hundreds of trucks go in, but then you have other days that the aid level is much lower. Continue to be barriers to the delivery of aid inside Gaza that we work to try to overcome, but it continues to be really a crisis situation. And I think ultimately the conclusion that we have drawn is like the ongoing deaths of civilians in an active conflict zone, the provision of aid in an active conflict zone is very difficult, and it's another reason why it's so critical that we reach a ceasefire.
Let me ask you on the appointment of ambassadors. The coming administration named Mark Huckabee as ambassador to Israel, and Israel named Leiter, who is a well-known Kahanist, and as ambassador to Washington. So I want to ask you, doesn't it seem like, maybe the whole U.S.-Israel diplomatic engagement will focus on maybe settlements and annexation and so on with these two? And
you mean the post-January 20th diplomatic engagement?
January 20th, yeah. Of course I'm asking you. You always say that there's one president at a time, one administration at a time. Well, we always say the same thing. But is there anything where you can actually say, we will not accept? If he comes, I don't know when Leiter is coming to Washington, but maybe something that, this is not a good idea. Or issue a statement that this is not.
First of all, let me just say, with respect to other countries, they are free and open to appoint ambassadors as they see fit. It's not a decision for the United States. And when it comes for the policies that will be pursued by the Trump administration and the personnel appointed by the Trump administration, it's just not something that I should speak to. I am happy to speak to our ambassadorial appointments, but not those being made by the Trump administration.
But you do have a view. This is U.S. diplomacy at its finest.
I have a view that it is my job to stand up here and speak on behalf of the personnel that President Biden has appointed and the policies that he is going to pursue, and not opine on whatever policy positions an administration that I will not speak for may choose to pursue.
Okay, so in principle, you think that the United States of America should have no say-so on the, as far as the character of said ambassador is, whatever crimes he may have committed, and whatever, it's all acceptable?
If we started trying to pick and choose and opine on every ambassador that 200 countries around the world appoint to the United States, we would be in this briefing room for a very long time every day. Tom, go ahead. I'll come to you next, Nike.
Ezgi and the meeting today. Just on a point of fact, you've set out how you can't speak for the Department of Justice and the call for a US-led investigation, but that's not all the family are asking for. And one of the things they want is some basic information for the State Department to ask the Israelis, for example, for the name of the unit involved, the name of the unit commander, things that they would want in the interest of transparency as American citizens who seen their loved one killed. I mean, are you asking for those things from the Israelis?
So we are asking for the results of their investigation, I would assume, but we'll see when we get the results of that investigation. You would expect that investigation would talk about the unit that was involved as well as the things that have happened. We will see what's actually in that investigation when we get the report from the government of Israel, but what we committed to the family is that we will brief them as soon as we get those answers.
Some of these things are quite basic things that aren't the result of an investigation. I mean, knowing the unit involved is a very basic piece of information.
I hear you,
they don't even know that the US could ask the Israelis now.
I hear you, but look, they're in the middle of an investigation. Well, I shouldn't say in the middle. They're near the end of an investigation where we expect that they're going to come to us and brief us on the results of that investigation. And if we don't get satisfactory answers to the questions that we have asked of them, of course we will continue to press them for more information. Saeed, is there something you'd like to share with the rest of the class over there?
Actually would. I'm looking at the ministers that are being appointed to run Syria. So maybe you ought to take a second look at that.
Maybe on silent mode, not for the rest of us.
Yeah. To continue, do you have any sympathy with an American family who look at this situation and, in their view, see differential treatment? Because here you have an American that's been killed by a strong ally of the United States, which is armed by the United States. Those weapons go into the West Bank. They go into the use of live ammunition against civilian protests in the West Bank. And yet they believe that nothing is being done. They said they walked out of that meeting today and felt no further sense of optimism after the meeting with the Secretary. Do you have any sympathy with that frustration?
Of course we have sympathy for the family. And the Secretary said that directly to the family. And if you heard the Secretary's public comments, not just what he said privately to the family, but you all heard his public comments after she was killed, when he made clear that her death was unacceptable, that it was an avoidable tragedy, that it was something that should not have happened and should not happen again, and that we will demand answers from the government of Israel. And we are demanding answers from the government of Israel. Now, we also respect that when there is an ongoing investigation, it's appropriate to get those answers at the end of that investigation, not in the middle. That's the same thing our law enforcement agencies and our military would do, by the way, if they were responsible for the death of a citizen of another country. They would complete an investigation and then talk about what they've found when that investigation ended, not when they were in the middle of it. Now, if we don't get appropriate answers to the questions that we have put to the government of Israel when we're briefed on the outcome of that investigation, we will absolutely go back and demand more. We 100% understand why Aysenur's family is demanding answers and is demanding accountability, and so are we. We are doing it on her behalf, and will continue to do so. And I cannot in any way imagine the tragedy that they have had to go through, and I would be every bit as angry if as they are if I were in their shoes.
I guess their frustration is about, of course, what they see as the absolute injustice of her being killed by a military force while she's at a civilian protest. Not just that, but about the fact that she was an American citizen, and they don't see their own government, in their view, doing enough. I am in no way going to quarrel with anything that they have said, because if I were in their shoes, I would absolutely be demanding accountability, and I would be pressing my government for answers as well, and they were absolutely right to do so. And what I can tell you is that we are demanding accountability. We are pressing the government of Israel for answers, and as soon as we have those answers, as soon as that investigation is complete, we will provide them to her family. Okay, and it's just that then goes to the wider issue, which is, and again, the attorney for the family says this: we have been here so many times before, Shireen Abu Akleh, Rachel Corrie, Omar Assad, where American citizens killed by the Israeli military, and you have said the same things. You've said we'll wait for the outcome of the investigation. In the case of Shireen Abu Akleh, in the end, you said that you've got the Israelis to change their rules of engagement. But here we see live ammunition used against a civilian protest in a village that has seen their land taken away by an illegal settlement outpost. So they say this is systematic. This is, the use of live ammunition against civilians, and it's been going for a very long time. This is your ally that you arm, and still nothing changes.
And we have made clear to them the outcome was unacceptable. We have made clear to them that they need to look at their rules of engagement, and we will continue to press that with them. Yeah.
Thanks, Matt. Because you use the words, no party should take any actions or any actions that are unilaterally in the interests of that other party over the broadest interests of the Syrian people. There's no way that you could then see what Israel's doing that's not a unilateral action in the interest of it.
So first of all, we have made that clear to every party, including the government of Israel. I'm not sure that just to argue with the kind of the logic train that you presented, I'm not sure that increased weapon stockpiles sitting around Syria is necessarily something that's in the interest of the Syrian people at the end of a brutal civil war when they have seen those weapon stockpiles turned on their own people.
What about the territory that is being invaded by Israel, that is the buffer zone?
And we have made quite clear that we believe that action ought to be temporary. Israel has said, and they can speak for themselves, that they took the action because they saw the Syrian army withdraw from that buffer zone, and it created a vacuum that could be filled by terrorist groups. They have said it's temporary. They can speak for themselves. We have made clear that we believe it also ought to be temporary.
In Washington later today, the Syrian embassy is raising the opposition flag. My understanding is you guys signed off on that.
I have seen that reporting. I don't know what it comes from. We don't control that building. We don't control the operations that happen there. So the raising of a flag is a decision that's made by the Syrian permanent representative to the United Nations.
And you haven't recognized that new flag?
We have not. No, we have not. Tom, come back to you.
There's no change in status of the Syrian embassy in Washington, D.C.
No, there is not.
I think there's probably an erroneous kind of thing that's circulating online suggesting it could be reopening, but I mean, this obviously won't happen.
No change. Umeric, go ahead.
Clarification.
Yeah.
So you're saying that the destruction of Syrian arms and the Syrian army is actually in the benefit of the Syrian people? I just want to.
That is not what I said. I
So
said
what
that
did you say on
this? I said this is what the way the government of Israel has explained the actions that they are taking. I was just interrogating, as I said, the logic train of Willie's question.
But you said something akin to, I think that the arms and so on that were used
That have been
against the
turned
Syrian
on the
people,
Syrian people.
that would be to their benefit. That's what you're saying?
That's not what I said.